This is a fantastic poem. Partly it's fantastic because it's so strange and so odd to try and find out what it means. Blake had great influence on generations after him. He wasn't immediately seen as a success. In fact, most people didn't know about his poetry for several years until after his death. But it was during the late 19th century and then again in the mid to late 20th century that his poetry had a resurgence. And he began to be seen as a tremendously powerful visionary, partly because of poems just like this one. This poem, The Little Girl Lost, is one where it's almost like a poem that works in a dreamlike realm. There are certain things that we can say conclusively about the poem, but most of the imagery is like something out of the subconscious, something that we have in dreams occurring in our own subconscious realm. The first thing to note is that the main character in the poem, Laika, it has a name that is based upon the word lux lucis in Latin. It's a variation of that word, the word meaning light, patron saint of the blind, and also patron saint of light and of fire. So she is herself an image of seeing. And the whole poem begins in an almost prophetic manner, where he says, in futurity, in the future, I prophesy that the world will from its sleep emerge, from a deep sentence, that the world is cast in a dark sleep, and at some point it will emerge from that sleep. It will arise and, as he says, seek for its maker meek, that all the world at some point will long for its maker. Now that prophecy sets the tone for what happens in the narrative portion of the story. And as we can see here in the plate, there's a division that occurs roughly after the second stanza, where he suggests that the first part of the stanza is the prophecy setting the tone for the rest of the poem, and then there's that branch that comes out and juts into the middle of the poem, and then the rest of it is the narrative of the poem. And so we have to take that opening prophecy of the world seeking for its maker as being a foreshadowing or a looking forward to what the meaning of the rest of the narrative is. Then here's this young girl, this Laika, who lives in a southern clime, a clime that is not prone to pain and sorrow and misery, more like a desert, more like a territory that is itself perhaps warmer and abundant, and more like northern Africa or something. And that this young girl basically wakes up from her sleep and she finds that she's lost, that her mother is gone. And the 7-year-old girl goes wandering about looking for her mother, and then goes to sleep in the desert again. And it's at that point that she has all these strange creatures emerge from out of their caves, it says. They come out from under the ground and they find her. Well, 7 years old is an appropriate time for this to happen to some degree, because 7-year-old is right on the verge of becoming a woman. And it's at that era where the young girl is no longer completely innocent. She's beginning to see what the world is about, beginning to see what she herself is going to be as a woman, the role she's going to adopt as a woman, and is beginning to have inklings or thoughts of what love is like. Beginning to have thoughts and inklings about what love is like. So in the poem, in the narrative, the wandering, the waking up and then the wandering in the desert is in some ways representative of a young girl's transition into being a woman. But it's also that Laika, the light here, is like the earth waking up at some point to long for its maker, to long for the creator of the world. And in longing for the created world, goes out to the desert to find him, much like the going out to John the Baptist to see a person clothed in soft raiment. But Laika doesn't find out there just a prince. She finds a lion. He doesn't appear as just a man, but as this powerful beast, primordial, dark, something out of the subconscious again, that comes and takes her in her sleep and carries her away. And she's given the clothing of a lioness, adopts the role of a lioness, his mate, his queen, his companion, but taken down into that underworld. So at the end of the poem, it's not clear whether or not the lion is basically carrying her down to a sentence that he prophesies at the beginning, or whether or not she is longing for her maker and finds the maker, and the maker isn't quite the bright thing that she expected. One way or the other, as we see in the poem, there is this beauty and this joy and this almost ethereal quality of romance to the poem, which itself is quite striking. Even the very title, Little Girl Lost, could mean on the one hand, lost from her mother, lost in the desert, or that when a girl becomes a woman, she leaves behind that innocence, that little girlness. It's lost. She can never go back to it again. She is now a woman.